My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 32 years old, a communications officer in the U.S. Army. For the past 14 months, I've been stationed at a remote base in South Korea, working on a classified long-range surveillance operation. The mission was so sensitive they didn't allow leave, not even for holidays. It was the longest I'd ever been away from home. Back in Atlanta, my wife, Emily, was holding things down. She's a nurse, strong, independent, the kind of woman who doesn't break easily. We met in college, fell hard, and got married right before my first overseas deployment. We've always said we'd wait until things settled down to start a family. But last year, after talking it through, we decided to try, right before I shipped out. The distance was brutal, internet was spotty, and communication was limited. Still, I made it a point to write her every week, handwritten letters, voice messages, even little poems. She sent photos of our dog updates from work and reassured me that she was okay. And for a while, I believed everything was fine. But in the pit of my stomach, something didn't sit right. She started canceling video calls. Her messages became shorter, more distant. I chalked it up to stress. I had no reason to suspect anything. Until one day she asked to talk. Her voice was shaky. Her words changed everything. It was a rainy Thursday when the message came in, just past midnight on my end. The power had flickered twice already, and I was lying on my cot half asleep when the base's Wi-Fi finally kicked in. For a few minutes, I checked my phone out of habit. One new voice message from Emily. Her voice trembled like she'd been crying. "Danny, I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say it. Please don't freak out. Just listen." My heart started pounding. I sat up straight, gripping the phone tighter. "I'm pregnant," she said, barely above a whisper. At first, I couldn't breathe. Pregnant, my heart wanted to leap out of my chest, but then like a cold wave crashing over me, logic set in. I had been overseas for 14 months. 14 months. There was no possible way this baby was mine. I played the message again, hoping I'd misheard. I hadn't. She was calm, almost numb, no explanations, no follow-up. I stared at the metal ceiling above my head, my ears ringing. I felt like I was falling, even though I was sitting still. My hands shook, my mouth went dry, and one question echoed louder than anything else. Whose baby is it? As I sat there in the darkness of my bunk, the silence of the base pressing down on me, my mind spun. I kept replaying Emily's message over and over like a broken record. It didn't make sense. How could this be happening? I couldn't think straight, my mind racing back to the last time I saw her. The flight to the deployment had been a blur. I had just kissed Emily goodbye at the airport, promising her I'd be back in a year. She smiled that smile, the one she always gave me when she was hiding something, when she didn't want me to worry. But I never saw it coming. Not the deployment, not the isolation, and certainly not this. The months passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The nights were the hardest. I'd try to keep in touch with her, but it was never the same. She'd tell me everything was fine, that she was keeping busy, but I could sense the distance in her voice. I thought about the last time we spoke before I left, when we'd stayed on the phone late into the night, just talking about everything and nothing at all. She'd mentioned wanting to start a family one day, but we had talked about it being someday. Not now, not while I was so far away. We had made plans to travel to buy a house, to build our future together. I'd promised her that no matter how hard it got, we would be okay. But as the days turned into months, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There were times I'd catch myself looking at old photos of us, remembering the warmth of her touch, her laugh, her scent when we'd curl up on the couch and talk about everything and nothing at once. But there was always that nagging thought that something seemed off, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I had tried to push those thoughts away, burying them in the monotony of the deployment. My days were filled with drills, patrols, and briefings. When I wasn't on duty, I'd try to reach out to Emily, sending texts and emails, trying to bridge the distance. But when she'd respond, it was always just a little too late. I would send her a message in the morning, and by the time I got a reply, it would be late at night. It wasn't that she was avoiding me. I told myself that. But there was a sense of coldness, something missing in her words. And now, sitting in the darkness of my bunk, I had my answer. The distance wasn't just because of the time zones or the circumstances. It wasn't just about the miles between us. Something had shifted between us, and as much as I hated to admit it, I knew deep down that the truth was more painful than I could have ever imagined. I replayed the last moments before I left her eyes, the way she kissed me. It was all so normal. But was it? Had I missed something? Was I blind to the cracks forming under the surface? The cold, hard truth was this: Emily had changed, and I hadn't seen it coming. I couldn't just sit there staring at the screen and hoping the truth would magically appear. No, if I wanted answers, I had to dig deeper. Emily wasn't just hiding something from me, she was hiding everything. And if I wanted to understand what had really happened, I needed to find out for myself. The call from my best friend Jake had been a wake-up call. I wasn't going to let this slide without knowing the full story. I started by going back through every message, every call, and every interaction we'd had since I left. It wasn't easy. There were months of missed calls, texts left unanswered for hours, and the painful silence of her responses when I needed her most. But I had to sift through all of it. There was something about the way she'd responded to me in the last few weeks that didn't sit right. She would always say things like, "I'm just busy, but I'm fine," or "Everything's good, don't worry." But her words never matched the tone behind them. It was like she was trying too hard to convince me everything was okay. The more I dug into the messages, the more the cracks started to show. It wasn't just one thing, but a series of small moments. Details that, when strung together, told a much darker story. Her responses became less frequent, colder. She would tell me about her day, but never mentioned what she was doing, who she was with. She'd send me pictures of herself, but they were always in places I didn't recognize. It was as if she was trying to distance herself from me in ways that didn't make sense. I needed more. A text, an email, anything that could provide the pieces to this puzzle. Then one afternoon, something caught my eye. It was a photo, one of the last she'd sent. She looked happy, smiling in front of a cafe, but something about the background seemed off. The way she was dressed, the angle of the photo. It didn't line up with anything she'd told me before. My gut twisted as I zoomed in on the details. I decided to dig deeper. I had a few friends back home who still kept in touch with Emily, people who had been close to us before I left. I couldn't help myself. I reached out to them. Maybe they knew something I didn't. They didn't tell me much, but enough to raise more questions. There were whispers about late nights, about Emily spending time with someone who wasn't me. The pieces started to fall into place, and I hated every minute of it. The woman I'd married, the woman I trusted, had been living a completely different life without me. I felt betrayed. I felt stupid. But I couldn't back down now. I needed to confront her. I needed to hear the truth, even if it tore me apart. At this point, I was on a mission. I wasn't just asking for answers anymore. I was demanding them. I knew the next step would be the hardest, but I couldn't wait any longer. My mind raced with questions. Who was she with? What had been going on behind my back for all these months? I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I knew I couldn't rest until I had the truth. And the truth, no matter how ugly, was the only thing that mattered now. The day of the confrontation arrived faster than I'd expected, and I was barely holding it together. My hands trembled as I paced back and forth in my apartment. The weight of the information I had gathered pressing down on me like a 1,000-pound boulder. Every step I took felt like a move closer to the truth, but with each passing moment, my heart sank further. I knew that what I was about to do would change everything. There would be no going back from this. The call was set. I'd already planned to fly back to the States, but this was going to be a face-to-face meeting. I needed to see her, to hear her voice, to watch her eyes, as she tried to explain everything. I wasn't just going to sit idly by and let the lies pile up any longer. I needed to confront her directly. No excuses, no distractions. As the plane touched down in New York, my stomach churned. I could feel the anxiety in my chest, my breath shallow and quick. I hadn't seen Emily in over a year, but the thought of seeing her again filled me with a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. What had happened to the woman I married? The woman I thought I knew? I couldn't reconcile the picture of her that had lived in my mind with the reality of the person she had become. When I finally arrived at her apartment, everything felt off. The place that once felt like home now felt foreign to me. Her door was slightly ajar, the soft hum of music coming from inside. I knocked. At first there was no response. I knocked again, louder this time. Then I heard movement from the other side. Emily opened the door, her face a mixture of surprise and confusion. She looked different, tired, thinner than I remembered her eyes avoiding mine, but it was her smile that cut me the most. It wasn't the genuine warm smile I knew. It was forced, almost as if she was trying to convince herself that everything was fine. "Jack, what are you doing here?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. I didn't answer her question. I didn't need to. I took a step inside, closing the door behind me with a deliberate click. The silence in the room felt suffocating, like everything had already been said and unsaid in the time it took me to walk through the door. "Emily," I began, my voice low but firm. "I know what's been going on." Her face froze, and for a brief second I could see the mask slip. Her eyes darted toward the floor, as if searching for a way out, a way to avoid this conversation. But there was no escaping now. Not after everything I had uncovered. I've seen the photos. I continued, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "I've talked to people I know. What you've been hiding." Her gaze shot up to meet mine, but this time there was no pretending, no more smiling. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She swallowed hard, her expression faltering. It was as if the weight of her secret was finally crushing her. "Jack, please," she started, but I didn't let her finish. I had heard enough excuses over the phone, enough empty words that never explained anything. I wasn't going to let her derail this conversation with more lies. "No, I need to hear it from you. Emily, all of it. I need to know why you kept this from me. Why you've been living this double life while I've been stuck overseas." She closed her eyes as if steeling herself for what she knew was coming. The silence stretched on, unbearably long. I could feel the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder each second, amplifying the crushing weight of the truth. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I didn't want to hurt you." "Jack, I swear I didn't." Her words were soft, hesitant, but I could hear the cracks in her voice. I wasn't sure whether it was guilt or fear, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. "Then what happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my heart breaking at the sight of her. "What did you do, Emily? How could you do this to us?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "It wasn't what you think. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to explain how much I needed someone. I wanted to scream, to demand more, but I held myself back. I needed to hear the rest of the story, even if it shattered me completely. The truth is," she continued, tears beginning to form in her eyes, "I felt so alone. Jack, you were gone for so long. I tried to make it work, but it was like you weren't even there anymore. And then I met someone." I felt a coldness sweep over me, like all the blood had drained from my body. I already knew the answer, but hearing it from her lips made it real. The betrayal, the deception, the lie we'd been living for so long. "You didn't just meet someone." I said, my voice sharp. "You've been with him. All this time." Her eyes flickered with shame, and she nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping under the weight of the truth. "Yes. I never meant for it to go this far, but it did. I'm so sorry, Jack. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. The pain in my chest was too much to bear. The realization of what she had done, too overwhelming. I don't know if I can forgive you for this," I whispered, my voice breaking. I left Emily's apartment with a heavy heart, the weight of her confession still crushing me as I stepped out into the night. The city lights blurred around me, and the cold air hit my skin like a slap. It felt as though the ground beneath me had been ripped away, leaving me suspended in a world that didn't make sense anymore. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had believed in, had been shattered in that one conversation. There was no way to go back from this. As I boarded the flight back to my base, the journey felt surreal. The flight attendants moved through the aisles offering drinks and snacks, but I couldn't focus on anything. My mind replayed every word Emily had said, every tear she had shed. I couldn't escape the image of her standing there, telling me that she had cheated, that she had let someone else into our life, someone who had been there for her, while I was thousands of miles away doing my duty. The anger I had felt earlier was slowly being replaced by a deep, gnawing sadness. I had been gone for too long. I had spent too much time focusing on my career, on my job, on everything else that was supposed to matter. And now it was clear nothing mattered more than the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew. How had I missed the signs? How had I allowed myself to believe that everything was fine, that she could wait for me, that we could survive this distance? As the plane touched down in California, the familiar hum of the engine stopping brought me back to reality. I gathered my things in a haze mechanically, walking off the plane and through the airport. Everything felt foreign. I hadn't been home in over a year, but even the airport, the faces, the sounds, they all seemed so distant, like I was walking through someone else's life, not my own. I grabbed my bag from baggage claim and stepped outside, the crisp air filling my lungs. The warmth of the California sun hit me as I moved to the parking lot, but it didn't bring any comfort. It didn't matter how much I tried to tell myself that everything would be okay. I wasn't sure if it could ever be okay again. I had no idea where to go. I didn't want to go back to my apartment, where the memories of Emily and I were too fresh, too painful. I didn't want to stay in the city where everything had gone wrong. The streets, the places we used to visit, everything felt tainted now. Instead, I drove aimlessly, the steering wheel cold beneath my hands. I found myself pulling up to a quiet park on the outskirts of town. I parked the car and sat there staring out at the empty swings swaying in the breeze. The silence of the park seemed to echo the emptiness inside me. I could still hear her words in my mind. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, but those words were hollow now, no longer enough to excuse what had happened. I reached for my phone and started scrolling through the messages and calls I had missed while I was abroad. Most were from friends, family, the usual updates. But one stood out. It was a text from my mom asking if I was okay, reminding me that home was always there for me. If I needed it, I had always thought of myself as strong, resilient, unbreakable. Even I had done everything to serve my country, to make sure I did my job well. But this was something I wasn't prepared for. The betrayal wasn't just from Emily. It felt like a betrayal of everything I had worked for, everything I thought was right in my life. I tried to call my mom, needing to hear her voice, to feel some sense of familiarity in a world that had turned upside down. The phone rang and then her voicemail kicked in. I left a message, my voice breaking as I tried to explain, to make sense of it all. But the truth was, I didn't have any answers. I wasn't sure if I would ever have answers. I stayed in the park for what felt like hours, just thinking, reflecting on everything that had led me to this point. The time away, the lack of communication, the growing distance that I had refused to acknowledge. I couldn't ignore the fact that something had been wrong for months. But I had been too caught up in my own world to notice I had ignored the signs, thinking that a phone call or a letter could somehow fix the growing chasm between us. Eventually, I made my way back to my apartment. The place felt cold, empty. The memories of the life we had built together lingered in the corners of every room. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape her. I couldn't escape the feeling that, in the end, my job had come first, and it had cost me everything. I spent the next few days in a daze, too lost in my own head to make any real decisions. The reality of what had happened was too much to face all at once. I didn't know if I wanted to see Emily again, didn't know if I could handle it, but I knew one thing. I had to figure out what to do next. I had to decide what I wanted, what I was willing to fight for. I couldn't go back to the past, but I could decide what came next. I had to start over. And starting over was the hardest part of all. Days passed in a blur, and the weight of Emily's betrayal hung over me like a dark cloud blocking out everything else. I had spent so much time trying to avoid the truth, pushing it to the back of my mind, hoping it would just fade away. But the longer I stayed in that apartment surrounded by the remnants of our life together, the more undeniable the truth became. Everything had changed. I couldn't escape it anymore. The lies, the broken trust, the realization that the woman I had loved, the woman I had been so committed to, had deceived me in ways I couldn't have imagined. I thought about all the moments we had shared, the late-night phone calls, the plans for our future, the dreams of building a life together. How could everything have been so perfect in my mind, when in reality it was falling apart right beneath my feet? I knew I had to face the truth head on. There was no other choice, but the truth didn't feel like a simple revelation. It felt like a slow, agonizing unraveling of everything I had believed in. I reached out to Emily. The call felt unnatural, like I was reaching into the abyss, unsure of what I was hoping for. She answered on the second ring, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the tension in the silence between us, the weight of unspoken words hanging thick in the air. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Ryan, I don't know where to start," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Start by telling me the truth." I replied, the words coming out sharper than I had intended, but I couldn't help it. I was angry, hurt, and desperate for clarity. She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke again, her voice trembling. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I swear I didn't. I was lonely, Ryan. I didn't know how to handle everything on my own. I didn't know how to keep pretending like I was okay when you were gone." Her words cut through me like a knife. The loneliness, the distance, the silence. It all made sense now, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. So what? You just found someone else to fill the gap. Someone else to pretend everything was fine while I was out there fighting for our future. I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I just needed someone to talk to, someone to help me through the dark times. And it spiraled from there. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. I sat down on the couch, my mind racing, trying to process her words. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive her, to understand that loneliness could drive people to do irrational things. But there was also a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I had been away serving my country, and she had betrayed the trust we had built over the years. The truth in all its rawness was too painful to ignore. I don't know what to do with this, Emily, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I understand, Ryan. I just wanted you to know the truth. I owe you that much. But I understand if you can't forgive me, I don't expect you to. I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. Her apology felt hollow, like it couldn't undo the damage she had done. The truth was out now, but it didn't fix anything. It didn't heal the wounds she had caused, and it didn't erase the fact that I had lost faith in her. In us, I didn't know what the future held for me or for Emily. I didn't know if we could ever rebuild what we once had, or if that was even possible. All I knew was that the truth had changed everything, and now I had to decide what to do with it. Could I move on from this? Could I rebuild my life, my trust, and my faith in love? Or would the scars of the past be too deep to overcome? One thing was certain. The truth had set me free in a way, but it had also left me with more questions than answers. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what my future would look like. The days that followed felt like a blur of confusion, anger, and sadness. I kept replaying everything over and over in my mind. Emily's betrayal, the lies, the emptiness that had been festering between us for so long. It felt like I was stuck in a place between what had been and what could have been, unable to move forward or let go of the past. I had always thought of our relationship as something unshakable, built on trust and years of shared memories. But now that foundation had cracked, and I couldn't ignore the rubble beneath my feet. I tried to find answers, tried to make sense of it all. Was I angry because of what she did, or was I more hurt because of what I had lost? The illusion of the life we once had. Emily's apology haunted me, and yet it didn't feel like enough. The damage was too deep. The lies too many. I had spent so much time questioning myself, wondering if I could have done something differently. But in the end, I realized there was nothing I could have done to prevent what had already happened. The hardest part wasn't just dealing with Emily's betrayal. It was figuring out who I was. Now I had been so consumed with the idea of our future together that I had forgotten how to live for myself. The man I thought I was had been shattered, and now I had to rebuild. I started to focus on myself again. Slowly but surely, I began to think about what I wanted out of life, independent of anyone else. It wasn't easy. I still missed her, sometimes, still wish things had turned out differently. But with each passing day, I realized that healing would take time, and that was okay. I wasn't going to rush it. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I understood that moving forward meant not just leaving the past behind, but also accepting the scars it had left. They would always be there, but they didn't have to define me.